and welcome to the Lighthouse. My name is Mari Curtano, and today I'm here with a new episode and with my wonderful guest, Portia Gough, who is a microbiologist. She's a scientist. How cool is that? And she is going to share with us her story about her traumatic childhood and domestic violence and how she navigated that and how she turned things around. So, without further ado, I'm going to jump straight into it. So welcome, Portia. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you, Marie. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh my God. So this is wonderful. I mean, last time we talked, I think we could have talked for hours.
Yes.
Yeah, like there was no limit to where we would go. So that was wonderful. So before, why don't you start by sharing a little bit about where you are right now, where you work, or if you want to share a few things about yourself, and then we can navigate slowly towards the other things.
Sure. Yeah, right now I am a scientist. Like you said, I'm a microbiologist at a big biomedical research institute in the US. And last year I just got my own small lab, which is a huge honor. So I am living my childhood dream. I always wanted to be a scientist from a young age. I connected with the natural world and it brought me a lot of joy to study nature. And so I get to live out my dream. And it's an incredible experience because for most of my life, I didn't think that I would get to a place like this. So I'm very excited about what I do. And in terms of my research, I always like to say, I study how the good bacteria help us heal. Our relationship to the microbial world is sort of a metaphor, I think, for how humans can relate to a lot of the world where they see this adversarial relationship, because we've mostly studied infectious diseases. Like when we think of microbes, we think of germs and infections, but really the vast majority of microbes are totally necessary for the functioning of the whole planet and our bodies. And pathogens are sort of an exception in the microbial world rather than the main driver of it. So bacteria are mostly here to either help us, or a lot of them don't care about our existence.
I love the way you explain it. Like at the end, we're like mostly made of bacteria, aren't we?
Exactly.
Our
Yeah.
body.
Yeah. They outnumber our own cells 10 to 1. And our genome, a lot of our genome comes from viruses. So it's fascinating to look at humanity in that way. And it sort of helps me understand that none of us are individuals, right? We're all these ecosystems. And so
Yes.
I get to study how our commensal microbes, the bacteria that live as part of our bodies, like support our health. I think people are beginning to be somewhat aware of this with probiotics, people taking probiotics and things like that. So I study basically a microbe that is a probiotic for the skin to heal eczema.
Yeah.
And so it's just really exciting to get to work on a state of health instead of a state of disease, and a state of harmony with the microbial world instead of an adversarial relationship.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. It's so important the way that you approach it and the way that you look at it is really wonderful. And when you said 10 to 1 bacteria I was like, whoa, I didn't actually know that. I know that we are mainly made of that, but I didn't know the analogy. Oh my God. Wow.
Wild. Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many of them because they're so teeny tiny, so we can hold a lot of them in our big bodies.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. I can just listen to this, that like we can do like a whole series on this. So I also want to get into later, because I know you mentioned last time we spoke about how you used plant medicine to balance your emotional and physical state and to bring more harmony and healing. But we're going to go into that towards the end. So would you mind starting by walking us through your childhood experience, because I know it's challenging, and it was challenging, and it was traumatic. So if you want to start walking us through your childhood years a little bit, so we can understand and know more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll begin by saying that I grew up, I'm biracial, and I grew up in the US in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is a hyper segregated city. And my family lived in the sort of like inner city of this like, declining urban area. In America, we call it the Rust Belt, like one of those cities where there were a lot of factory jobs. And then when the factories left, there's a high rate of unemployment, and the economics of the city suffered as a result. So when I was growing up, Milwaukee was like in pretty steep decline. And my family lived in, like a not so nice area of the city. And that is where I was growing up. And I stood out because I looked different from everyone, right? And so from a young age, people were always calling my identity into question, which is hard for a child to understand why people are doing that. And so since I was mixed race, my father is white and my mother is black, and I spent time in both families. So I was always moving between these two worlds that are quite different. And then on top of that, I ended up not going to school in my own neighborhood. My father got me enrolled in a school in a wealthy nearby suburb, and the schools were better there. They had a program at the time called Chapter 220, and it was meant to integrate the schools. And so I was one of the kids, one of a handful of kids that got to go from the predominantly Black, poor neighborhood to a predominantly white, wealthy neighborhood in the suburbs to go to school. And this further divided my world. So I was moving between all of these different worlds as a kid. I got around a lot between my mom's house and my dad's house because they were divorced when I was a baby. So yeah, moving between my mom's house and my dad's house, and then the wealthy area and the poor area. And so I got exposure to a lot of different worlds. And since I was moving around so much all the time, like daily, like daily back and forth between mom and dad and, inner city suburb, I feel like I never latched on strongly to a single identity for myself. And I also didn't feel, I think, very secure in the world, right? And on top of all of this, my mom and dad were quite different. So my father was very loving and accepting of me. But my mother was kind of the opposite. She had a lot of, I think, self-hatred. And sometimes when parents have that, they can put that on their children. And that's what my mother did. She didn't know how to handle her wildly fluctuating emotional states. And she wasn't getting treatment for her psychological issues. And so that led to her just lashing out at me from the time I was a very small child. So I don't recall ever not being afraid of my mother. She was physically and emotionally abusive to me throughout my childhood. And I could be, I could be severely punished, I'll just say, to
Of course.
limit the language. I could be severely punished for expressing any emotion at all, even joy. Like even when I would say that something she did made me happy, it could, just depending on her mood, it could, set her off. Just me expressing any kind of emotion or opinion in her presence. So it was very severe. So I was moving between being really safe with my father and then being not safe at all with my mother. And just, these extremes. By the time I was 12, it had just like run me down. I was very afraid of the world, right? I felt very disconnected. I felt very isolated because I would talk about what was happening at mom's house, but since I think my father wasn't witnessing it, he didn't think it was that bad until it was clear that I was like really, really, really struggling and like extremely depressed. So when I was 12, my father, he realized how bad it was, and he felt like I was old enough to stay at home on my own while he drove the bus at night. He drove a bus for the city. That was his job. And he decided to just have me stay with him, which is something I'd been begging him to do for years. And he finally decided, okay, she's clearly been through it. I was hardly talking. I was like, just, not engaging at school. I got to recently look at like my report cards from when I was a kid. And like, I got to see like all the teachers' notes about how I wasn't really talking and how they thought I had potential, but they were also concerned because I wouldn't really participate or engage, and my grades were not great. So, I was like in a rough spot by the time I was 12, and my dad wanted me to get better. And so, yeah, he had me live with him, and then he started taking me to therapy. And
Mhm.
I'd had a little bit of therapy as a young child when my parents were first getting divorced. Like there was like little group therapy for kids of divorced parents and things like that. But I don't think that made much of an impression on me at that age.
Well, it
Yeah,
makes sense because
yeah,
it wasn't just about the divorce, was it? There was something
right.
much deeper, so it didn't
Yes.
touch the depth.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
That group didn't get into anything that was really going on for me.
Mhm.
And as a child, I remember like not knowing how to like say what was happening to me. It's even hard for adults to find the words. And so looking back at my child self, I'm like, yeah, I didn't know how to explain how awful it was. And also that was just like my reality. You don't have a good frame of reference. Like you know that something is happening to you that's scary and that upsets you, but you don't really have access to the language as a child to be like, this is
Yes,
deeply traumatizing.
of
Like
course.
kids don't have that sense of things yet, really. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah,
right. And so
from what you were saying, because you were not able to express any feelings to your the main archetype in your life, your female archetype, your mother.
yeah.
Of course, there was. I can only imagine there was a total confusion, and coupled with the depression that you were feeling at the time, obviously, usually affects your voice, and you just can't speak,
Yes.
literally, and I can relate to that. I can
Okay.
relate to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But obviously you were very capable because you are a scientist today. So the teachers back then, they knew that you had potential, that you were very smart and intelligent. However, there was this blockage of your
Exactly.
throat chakra because of the
Yes.
trauma.
Right.
Mm.
Exactly. Exactly. And
So yeah. So you were
yeah.
saying you were having some therapy and it didn't go well. Obviously, we know now why, because it wasn't just about the divorce. And then
Yeah.
what happened after that?
Yeah.
You continued.
Right. So then, yeah, when I went back to therapy as a 12-year-old, it was clear that all the trauma was like being brought out into the open.
Mhm.
And as much as I could talk about it. And I did, like my dad attended some sessions with me and I got to tell him about some things that I hadn't told him about before, truly because like I didn't want to upset him. And there were
Mm.
things that happened that were so terrible that like it was hard to articulate that. Like to say it out loud would make it real. I think that's probably something a lot of people experience with like really
Yes.
traumatic events is like it's hard to talk about. And especially again being a child, like it's just you don't know what to do with this stuff.
Mm.
And but yeah, the safe space of therapy did help start the conversation and
Mhm.
start the healing process. And at that point I was so depressed that I was put on antidepressants when I was 12, and this is like in the early 90s when that kind of thing
Mhm.
didn't usually happen.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what the rate of use is now for 12-year-olds, but I think back then that was pretty,
Yeah.
unusual.
Unusual. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause this was like the early 90s, like around 1995 it would have been. Um, so the antidepressants helped for a time because it helped me see that there was another way to feel because I
Mm-hmm.
had been depressed for so long. Like, the depression had probably been going on since I was very young. And so that was the only that was like my normal, right? And it felt terrible. And I was like, if this is life, like,
Yeah, I hear
um,
you. I hear
and I would
you.
have these nice light moments with my dad, but the weight of the things going on with my mom was always with me. And so it was just like hard to be present for anything nice that was even going on, right?
Yes.
So once I was out though and just with my dad and in this safer place, like I said, like the healing could begin and the antidepressants helped for a little while. I think I was on them for about 6 months. And then even as a kid, like I always kind of had an aversion to medication. So
Mm.
I was like at some point, and my dad always gave me a lot of autonomy over my own body and my own health. And so I said at some point that I didn't want to be on the medication anymore. And so he let me go off of it. and things just kind of proceeded from there. Around the same time, I was having my first biology class, and since home was so chaotic for me as a kid,
Mm.
I connected early on to nature, like in our city there weren't many green places, but in the wealthy suburb where I went to school, it was close to Lake Michigan,
Mm.
and it's just a very beautiful area and lots of nice parks and things like that on the lakeshore. So that was my favorite place to go, and that was a place where I felt at peace. And when I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone, I could talk to the land and talk to the lake.
Mm.
And I always felt this trust for nature, because even if nature could be unpredictable in a sense sometimes, storms or whatever, natural disasters,
Yeah.
um it's like at least impartial or not judging you. So it's
You
just like,
know,
you know
I am 100% with you. I feel one sense I'm also very connected to nature since I was very young. And one thing that I can say is that you always feel like you belong. Whenever you are
yes,
in nature, there
yes,
is a sense of belonging without any conditions. It's just like, it's just so natural,
yeah,
very grounding, very like, oh yeah, this
exactly,
is me, this is my space. So I can
yeah,
totally relate. I still hug trees at the moment, so
me too.
you
Yeah,
know.
always, yeah, yep, yeah,
My friends have a laugh at me every time I send them pictures of here I am again.
yeah.
Um, so I totally understand and connect with what you're saying, that nature was your safe space. Nature was
Yeah,
your anchor, maybe we could say, right?
yeah, absolutely. And then, around this time, starting to unravel the trauma, having a biology class where I like more could learn about nature in a way that revealed the mechanisms going on, like the things that happen in our bodies that make us alive and make us
Mhm.
go. And to me, that was incredible to learn about, and I connected with it very deeply. And it kind of gave me an appreciation for my life at a time when I didn't
Mm,
necessarily want to be alive, like,
yeah, yeah,
I struggled with that feeling a lot as a kid of just not wanting to be here.
yeah.
But the study
Mm,
of life, it kind of helped the feelings of isolation, because it's like, oh, this thing that's happening, it's that, makes our bodies work, all these processes, they're happening in everyone.
mhm.
It's like this unifying thing. We're all, fundamentally the same, essentially, like, all the
Yes.
cells, everything at the most foundational parts of life, we are all more the same than we are different. Even with microbes, like the division of cells and the replication of DNA and things like that that has to happen for life to grow, those mechanisms are conserved throughout all of life, which is so cool to me. And so
It's
learning
amazing.
about those things, yeah, it's so amazing. And it gave me the sense of awe and wonder that
Mm,
disrupted my my feelings of isolation
the
and my
pattern.
feelings of,
Mm,
depression and all of that, that it
yeah.
sort of like would lift me up out of it whenever I would study it. So I just followed that thread.
It was your thing to get high, let's just say. So
Yeah,
getting
right.
high on it, right? You found
Yeah,
something to lift you up from that pattern that
right.
you're repeating. And I
Yes.
totally understand, because most people, when they feel the way that you're explaining, like they don't know there is another feeling. It's very common. I had another guest on the podcast, and talking to clients and people,
Yeah.
there are times when you just don't know there is another feeling. And though, like you also said, when you were taking even the chemicals,
Mhm.
the medication, you begin to feel that there is more. It's just
Right.
so we lead you out of it. But now you found a natural way, a natural thing to get high, which was
Yes.
nature and biology. Amazing.
Yeah. And I just kept following that. And it wasn't easy. Like I kept struggling all the way through high school and undergrad. So in high school,
Mm,
at that point in my healing journey, like I was having a lot of nightmares and I wasn't sleeping much. And my
okay.
father would actually let me stay home from school a lot because he knew I was struggling. Um, and there was like one year where like basically the only class I went to consistently was biology. It was like the only thing that would get me out
The
of
only
bed.
medicine that worked for you.
Right. Yeah. So like again, like this one thing as I was struggling, it was just like keeping me anchored right into
Yes,
life and just like
yes.
kept me when all I wanted to do was just hide and cover
Mm.
myself over. There was like, yeah, just this one thing where I was like, okay, but I want to keep learning about this. I want to keep doing this one thing. So and yeah, if you have just like one thing, if you can get yourself to do just one thing, that's a seed, that's a beginning, and like follow that because it's so meaningful. There's so much potential to transform those really dark feelings of isolation that we can get to when we've been traumatized.
This is a
Um,
powerful one. I have goosebumps as you say this because you kind of read my mind. And my question was, you were describing your lowest moment
yeah,
without me even asking the question. My question was floating around here. And you were just describing, I was going to ask what was your lowest moment. And you just described how you were struggling at school and you had to stay home because you just wanted to hide. So I'm getting this was of your lowest moment throughout this challenge as you were growing up. I'm sure there are loads of them. But we can consider this as, I guess, as the lowest moment.
yeah,
And then one question that I wrote down here, but I never follow this, as I told you at the beginning. But I do remember the question was like, what was the role of science in your life? What was how did it influence your life? And you have just mentioned now that it pulled me out. And when you express that, it's like you almost said it to the whole world, to anyone who's going through the same thing. Like, if you find that one thing that you can grab onto, it can transform all the darkness that you have
yeah,
from
yeah,
these traumatic experiences. And
exactly.
it's amazing how it did that to you.
Yes, yeah, because I was really, I mean, even all the way through into undergrad. So, I ended up going to college. I dropped out in my senior year because of panic attacks. Like I couldn't handle being around people. So all the way, at this point I was 22 and I was still struggling to manage the anxiety at this point was more so the problem. Like depression was still part of it, but
Mm.
the anxiety was so overwhelming that it was
Oh,
just, again, it was hard to be around people. And so I ended up dropping out my senior year. And I, of course, I ended up missing my first love. I missed biology. So I went back and I finished. And when I went back, I was taking better care of myself because along this way, I'm learning more and more about the mechanisms of life and feeling more and more awe and reverence and connection because of what I'm learning. It's almost like I've always been a little mystical or whatever. So to me, it was like this mystery school that I was in,
yeah,
learning, like the
it
molecular
is.
workings of life. It's so beautiful and incredible. And, I couldn't stay away from it. So even in that, again, another really dark time pulled me
Mm.
back out, so it's not like a linear thing. It's not like I like was climbing up and up and up. It was like, up and then back down a little bit and then up again and back down a little, there
Yes.
was, yeah. And that continued on through my 20s. I finished college. I worked for a while. I still wanted to be a scientist, but I was afraid to follow my dream initially.
Mm.
Getting through undergrad felt like an achievement. And also I'm from a family, no one's ever become a scientist before. It's
Yeah,
like, it's
great
this like kind of
achievement.
scary unknown, even though I'd been in a lab in undergrad. And my mentor there had told me, like, you could go to grad school. She knew I was not from a wealthy family. She was like, it's paid for because
Mm.
in the sciences, you get paid to go to school basically if you get to a PhD program. You don't pay
Amazing.
tuition and they pay you like a small living wage, like barely livable, but still you're not having to,
Something,
yeah, it's
an
something, right? Yeah,
incentive.
make it work. Exactly. And
Yeah.
at least you're not like taking on, not having to pay a really high tuition or anything like that for years and
Mm.
years. So that was in the back of my mind, but I was afraid to go for it because I didn't believe yet in myself, right?
Yes.
So I was just working as a med tech doing lab testing for hospitals and things like that. And I ended up though feeling really bored and I missed science. Like, again, I missed it. So I decided to, I'm like, okay, there's like, I don't know what else to do with myself, so I'm just gonna try this. If I fail, at least I tried, you know?
Yes.
Because I'm just like bored otherwise. So,
Yeah.
so I ended up going on this adventure of going to a PhD program, and I got into my first choice school, which I was shocked. And to me, I feel like that's this experience that others have too, of when you're sort of in alignment with what it is you're meant to do. If you can find that, um, it can really kind of, things have a way of working out. It's really interesting. And so going back to like how isolated I was as a kid, it was painful, but it also let me tune in to my inner voice, that inner wisdom that we all have.
Mm.
Um, and, I just, even though I was scared at certain points, I just kept following that. And like my inner wisdom was like, yeah, you should keep going with science, just keep going. And so, I got into this amazing program at University of Chicago, and then I ended up going and doing thesis research at this big biomedical institute where I am now. And I finished my degree, and I just like gradually worked my way up. And
That's
along the
incredible.
way, yeah, and like along the way, there were so many challenges too. Once I got to the PhD program, like research is,
Mm.
you have to discover something new, and it's really
Yes.
demanding. And to meet those demands, I had to heal more deeply. Like, I had to
Yes.
meet this challenge, right? And
Wow, it's
I,
interesting how everything is coming together towards that. So now that you mentioned that, first of all, one thing that you were talking about listening to the wisdom within, and I want to quote you. You were saying last time we spoke, you said something beautiful. I think you said, please correct me if I'm wrong. You said something along the lines, there is wisdom in pain or
yes,
suffering, which I really love that.
yeah,
And I guess this is what you have just explained, that even though I was in pain, I
right.
was guided to turn within and I followed my inner wisdom and guidance.
Yes, yeah. It's so powerful to
Mm.
listen to what it is you're feeling, to just allow the feelings. And it does take practice though, because those heavier feelings that come up in us, they can be scary, especially when the rest of society tells us that those feelings are bad or wrong, or that you shouldn't have them.
Mm.
It's like this,
Exactly.
because we're presented with this ideal of just like be happy.
Mm.
And like, and really,
Very.
like, to me the healing process was about not so much being happy all the time, but cultivating the skill of
Yes.
being with your feelings as they are. And when you do that, really amazing things can be revealed. If you can sit with whatever it is you're going through and just be present for it, um,
Yes.
it it will, there are things that are revealed in those spaces.
In the process,
You
this
know?
is the other thing that I wanted to say, because you said, because you were talking and you were explaining how you wanted to, you had to heal because you had this challenge, you had this target that you had to meet, and it was challenging and demanding, so therefore you needed to go deeper within yourself so you can go higher up in the external world. And
Exactly. Yeah.
tell us a little bit about what modalities did you find. I know we spoke last time, you talked about meditation, obviously introspection. What modalities of healing? How did you turn that fear, that anxiety, those emotions that are challenging and that are pulling you in one direction? How
Yeah.
did you bring it over this side? How
Yeah.
did you do it? Yeah.
It was meditation was a
Mhm.
huge, it's like the centerpiece. So once I got to grad school, there was a group of Zen monks that would hold a meditation session for folks at the university. And I had always been interested in meditation. I'd always been curious about it. So again, I was like following this curiosity. And I
Mhm.
just like went to a session. I was nervous, there's other people there, and I didn't know what to do. I had never done it before, but they're very welcoming in these spaces, and also like my social anxiety, I'm so shy, but like again, my curiosity, and
One.
it
Yeah.
calls me out. And I'm just like, I felt like I was like, I need help. I need something to help me manage all these feelings. And there's
Mm.
all these studies about meditation. You hear about how good it is for different things. So I was like, I want to try it. And I went to this session, and the monk just like, I showed up a little bit early, like they said in the posting. And he walked me through what to do, and like, you sit this way and just follow your breath, and if your mind wanders, that's fine. Just at some point you recognize it and you go back to your breath. And that sounds so simple. It is deceptively simple, right? Because like you hear that and you're like, well, so
Your
so
mind
what?
doesn't comprehend it, right?
Yeah. It's like, it sounds so basic. It's like, so you just sit there and
Too simple.
notice your breathing, and then if you're thinking, you just notice that and return to your breathing. But the key to that is that you're training your mind to, and your sort of being, to be more from the perspective of the observer of what's happening. Because isn't it interesting that we can observe our thoughts and observe our feelings? So if there's a way to observe those things, what are we really? We're the observer. Like, that's our true nature,
Depression,
you know? Yeah, like the
Yeah.
mind and its workings, that's not all of reality. That's not the only way to have an experience, right? Like, so meditation tuned me into just noticing things, and it kind of creates space around your thoughts and your feelings,
Yes.
but you can notice them, and then you notice the patterns, and you notice how you react to certain things. And yeah, all the chatter that goes on, all the judgments, you start to notice those things. And then when you're noticing them, and in meditation, you're sort of trained to notice them without judgment. When you're just noticing them, you can then begin to sort of notice also how they're influencing your life and your actions, and you can start to really transform the way you are in
Shift
the
things
world.
around.
Yeah, and you sort of like,
Wonderful.
I feel like it's a process of revealing like the things that we feel and the patterns that we can feel like we're stuck in. It's not a problem to be solved. It's just a process that's happening. And once you sort of open to that and allow things to just unfold instead of judging them and trying to control them, once you just allow and sort of trust life, things begin to transform just sort of naturally. You don't have to like control things. It's really amazing.
It is amazing because
Yeah,
it's the mind, our ego mind. I'm not talking about ego as a being the bad guy here, because
sure. Yep.
we need it in our life. But it's
Right.
the ego mind that identifies with everything and wants to control everything. But
Exactly.
there's another part of you that just needs to trust, because where there
Yes.
is control, it means there is lack of trust. So
Right.
so the whole point is to trust, surrender, and allow things to reveal themselves, like you said,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Allow
Exactly.
life to happen,
Yes.
because we are not making life happen.
Exactly.
Life is happening already through us.
Yes.
But
Yes.
the ego mind identifies with the fear, and he puts label on everything and wants to control everything. And that's why when somebody says, oh, just meditate and just stay there, it's like, okay, so then what,
Right.
but it's extremely powerful. It's literally an exercise, just
It is.
learning to surrender and allow things without having to do something about it all the time, even if it's inner talking.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. It's so
Mm,
powerful to cultivate the observer, the noticer, the thing
yeah,
that's noticing.
yeah,
And
wonderful.
and so I ended up, once I came out here to the DC area from Chicago, where I first started, the Zen meditation was the first one that I did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But like Zen doesn't give you a lot of tools to deal with your emotions. And
mm-hmm.
so
So,
I ended up, and so that was sort of like the foundation, but then I ended
yeah.
up learning Vipassana meditation
Mm.
through Tara Brach is like a pretty widely known teacher, and I got to go to her back when she still held in-person classes. I got to go to her classes, and that was so transformative. The Vipassana method, for again, she's sort of she's a therapist by trade.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah, that's her training. And so
mm-hmm.
she provides like a framework for handling the difficult emotions that come up. And so I practiced with her method. She calls it RAIN. You
Mm-hmm.
recognize the feeling, you allow it, you investigate, and then you nurture.
Mm,
And
beautiful.
it's like, yeah, bringing that to, and I trusted that practice and I practiced it. And I still do, all these years later. It was like 10 years ago or so that I started learning this, and it's still so helpful to me today. And that's like centerpiece of
Mm-hmm.
what brought me so much healing, was this practice of
Wonderful.
asana meditation and the rain method. There's like other methods that have come into like meditation. There's so many techniques and
Yes.
so much out there. And so I just, I try different things, and some things stick and some things don't, or
Yeah.
I need one method on one day and another method on another day. And like, that's fine. And sometimes I only have 5 minutes. Sometimes I have an hour. I just take whatever time I have. Like, your
Mhm.
practice can fit the shape of your life on any given day. And eventually those habits start to permeate into the rest of your life. So you're able to manage your emotions skillfully, or relate to them skillfully in real time, like in your regular
Yeah.
life. That
It's a
is
it's a
so helpful.
ripple effect, isn't it? Portia?
Yes,
It
exactly.
just creates a ripple effect because it starts from you, and if you are the centerpiece and it starts from within, just the ripple, you can see it in your life, in your
Exactly.
experiences. That
Exactly.
is wonderful. So thank you for sharing those, because I wanted to expand and so people can hear as well, our audience, the people who are watching and listening. I'm sure they would love to know what kind of methods did you use and what worked for you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Which brings me to the part that I mentioned earlier about plant medicine and how do you use plants, the power of plants to help you balance your emotions and your physical health. And yeah, this is so excited. I can't wait to hear about it. So tell us
Yeah.
what worked for you, or what did you use in terms of plants, or you can talk about plants and how they helped you.
Yeah. So I followed another curiosity, which was I always liked natural remedies. Like, I was
Yes.
always, like I said, like always really sensitive to even just cold medication. Like, just a lot of medications that they're given just like didn't seem to work well with my body. And so I always sort of gravitated more towards, if I can manage it with diet, exercise, or some kind of natural remedy,
Mm-hmm.
I'll sort of pick that instead. And
Yeah.
so my curiosity about these things sort of deepened over the years, and eventually
Mm-hmm.
I got this book by Rosemary Gladstar, Beginner's Guide to Herbalism, I believe it's called. And she has this beautiful writing style. It's so like inviting and simple, and her joy just like permeates through her books. And
Wonderful. We're
this,
gonna
this
put that link below at the
yeah,
below, yeah, for everyone to.
good. Yeah, because it's such a good place to start. So I got that book and I started working with some of the things that she describes. She like takes like about 20 plants or so are in that
Mm-hmm.
book, of just like common herbs that are in your kitchen, like thyme and garlic and rosemary, just the ways that you can use these to support your health. And the one that I started working with, though, that really helped me initially was nettles, because I was having trouble with energy and motivation. And
Mm.
also, I had a lot of allergies. So there's so many like flowers in this area, which is so beautiful. I love it. But it's also like in the spring that my allergies were out of control. So it's like a weird assignment. Like, nettles is also a natural antihistamine, but it contains a ton of nutrients, lots of minerals, and it we talk about also the energetics of plants. And so
Mm-hmm.
nettles is a plant that brings sort of this motivational energy. And as I got deeper into the study of herbalism, I ended up taking a year-long apprenticeship after, I got this book. I ended up going deeper into it, but because the
Amazing.
nettles were so amazing to me, I was like, this is what a plant can do. Because I was like having to take naps every day. I was still, I think, struggling with depression, even,
Mm. Yeah,
with
of
all the
course.
meditation, stuff like that. These things, especially if there's something that happens to you, I think in childhood, it shifts your physiology. Like, there's studies that show it changes your brain. And so, these are things that through all these techniques, I'm learning to manage and live with and work through and work with.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and so for me, the nettles at that time in my life, I really needed motivation. And that's what it gave me. I was like looking for a solution. I'm just like, there's no way, I'm only in my mid-30s. There's no way I should be like this low on energy and things like that. So the nettles really helped with that because they it's like a more bioavailable vitamin pill. You know, they have all these minerals, and if you drink the tea every day, you get the natural antihistamines and all these minerals, and just being properly nourished that way. I ended up not needing coffee anymore, because like the nettles would wake me up, and I still have like matcha or green tea, but like coffee ended up being more caffeine than I needed, and plus with the anxiety, it's like, like my I think my adrenals are easily triggered, so coffee is too much caffeine for my
For
body.
you, yeah.
Yeah. So so the nettles ended up sort of
So
solving a lot of,
you're drinking the tea basically. Nettles are like everywhere around here. My mother is picking up nettles, and she's doing like all sorts of things. I've had the tea as well, and it's amazing.
it's great,
Has so
right?
many great properties.
Yeah.
So you were
Yeah.
drinking the tea basically. It's a tea for us.
Yes.
My mom
Yeah.
she even makes like a proper, food out of it, like kind of a
Yes.
soup thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
so many
It's
things you can
so
do with it.
yeah.
They sting. Yeah, you have to be careful how you
Yes.
prepare them if you get them like fresh. But I guess you can get them from a shop. They are ready to just use in tea, I assume, which is most
Yes.
commonly used.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And I just get them in bulk from different herbal vendors. I make sure I get organic, and
Mm-hmm.
it's simple to just brew a jar of it in the morning. I use a jar and just pouring boiling water right over the herbs, letting them steep, in this case for about 30 minutes is ideal, um, to extract all the minerals. Yeah, that was my gateway plant, I always like to
Mm-hmm.
say. And then holy basil is another excellent one that's like, these are also like widely considered safe herbs to work with. Always use.
May I ask you something? Is there a difference between holy basil and basil?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
They're different plants. Yeah. So they're in the same family. They're both in the
Yes,
mint
yes.
family. Yep. But yeah, holy basil is from the Indian subcontinent, and there's also a variety that is from the African continent. Um, and they have adaptogenic properties. They also support the respiratory system, and they can boost your immune system, the
Mm.
different holy basil varieties. And the
Mm.
adaptogens, holy basil is one. Ashwagandha is another one that
Mm.
I often recommend to friends and family. Uh,
Yes.
is they are both, the adaptogens help your body cope with stress. They sort of just help open up space to manage stress, so you don't get as sort of overwhelmed over the course of your day if something doesn't go the way you want or whatever is going on. It just, they support, to me, the plants in this way, especially the adaptogens, support the inner work that you're doing. If you're meditating, journaling, doing other practices, they will support you in
Yes.
that and sort of help take these lessons into you more deeply. And it's always
Music
nice
is
to have
amazing.
like a, right? And it's nice to have like a physical thing that you're doing to go along with the sort of
Yes.
the other practices, right? Like telling your body,
Invisible practices with the visible
like,
stuff. And at the end
yeah,
of the day, all the greens have like, if we can call it a path of enlightenment, like when you're doing this inner work, meditation, trying to understand yourself, to work on your wounds and, get that darkness, let's say, those heavy, because these low vibration emotions are all heavy and we call them
yes,
heavier, they weigh on you. That's why sometimes
right,
people feel burdened, because there's really no burden, but you feel so weighted by everything and that darkness that you describe. So when you go towards clearing this heaviness and this darkness, obviously you're going towards the lighter version of you, and therefore towards the light. And we all know that plants and green stuff it grows with light and it attracts light, and it is light basically.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you want to be enlightened, you eat more green stuff, right?
Yes, yeah, that's such a great way to frame it. That's perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
because
like
it grows with
capture
the light
light.
of the sun. I mean, otherwise
Yeah,
it wouldn't. So everything that grows with the light, it contains that light. And
right.
so it does help with the process of what you're already doing. So this is another great way of doing it. But did you mean, so this plants that you said, there, can you take them like in form of a tea, or because I know there is also powders and all of that, which I use myself.
Right. So holy basil you can take as a tea. You can just like make a cup of tea with it, or it's also available as a tincture, which is an alcohol extract of a plant, and it's more concentrated. And so with a tincture, you just take like a dropper full, or sometimes just a few drops, depending on the plant.
Do you put it in a drink or something, or you just?
Yeah, you can put it in water, or you can take it directly under your tongue. And for ashwagandha, people usually take it as a powder in a capsule or mix into smoothies. And with that, like a small dose, even just a quarter teaspoon is enough. And for me, the holy basil is really, it can be interesting to take a plant like holy basil and meditate after you take it, either as tea or tincture. And so it can help facilitate your being able to open to the feelings that might arise.
Isn't it interesting that it's called holy basil?
Yeah. There's a
know
whole
that
lot of lore for that
they
plant.
use that, they use that in I think in the church. I was raised in a Christian Orthodox family. And so at the church they have this dried holy basil, and they dip that into holy water, and they do that in the church to to spread it on everyone else, that they have this thing. So there are loads of stories, but it's incredible. I also believe in the power of plants, and I believe that everything we need is already in nature, and nature provides for it. But I think people need to know more about this.
Yeah, because these medicines are real. They really do work to support your health. And the way I mostly use the plants is just to like maintain my health. But even when I get sick, I use garlic, and I'll use, like elderberry syrup and things like that. And there's just like nice ways to get engaged with this stuff. There's so many books and resources out there to help people get started. But I highly recommend working with plants to support your health and the health of your family. It's been such a rewarding path, the plant path, and that's like a whole, it's a whole chapter in and of itself in my life.
We can do another episode just talking about plants and how can plants help us in different aspects. But thank you for sharing this important. Definitely, we're gonna list all of them below in the caption for people to see. And it's just so many amazing things. I wanted to ask you, like, what would you recommend? You've already shared a lot here, and you kind of answered my questions without even me asking you. It's amazing how in tuned and connected we are. I wanted to ask, what final message do you have for someone who is listening and who could relate, or maybe even had experiences similar to what you have had? Maybe depression, maybe anxiety, maybe some traumatic experiences in their childhood, and what the struggles are. What would you tell them as a final message?
It's that healing is possible, and it's real. It's not just possible, it's inevitable if you open to what is happening, even if what is happening is really dark. If you can just take a moment to breathe and connect with what you're feeling, that's really a powerful thing to do. You have wisdom in you to do what needs to be done to heal. And it's not going to look the same for everyone. And you're not always going to feel great through the process. There's going to be times where it's scary or you're uncertain, and that's totally natural. But just know that it's just about putting one foot in front of the other. It's just about this moment. Don't project too far into the future. Don't get too obsessed about the past. Just as much as you can, be present, because everything you need is in this moment. It really is. I don't say that as some naive person who's never been through anything. I've been through, like as a child, really horrific things. And so I feel confident in what I'm saying, that healing is a natural, inevitable process. It is life itself, and you are life itself, and so you can heal. Yeah.
Wonderful. I was having waves of goosebumps as you were saying these words, and it's incredible. Yes, it is true. You are here as proof that you can make it through that, and you haven't even scratched the surface to tell us like the real stuff that happened. But I can only imagine. And there's no need, obviously, to do that. But you are here as a testimony, as you know, you stand as proof that healing can happen. And yeah, sometimes it's hard, but you also said something beautiful last time. I'm going to quote you again. We spoke. I think you said something. We struggle in isolation, and we thrive in connection.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. That's
So,
what I've learned, is it's about connecting.
mm,
All of life is interconnected. Like, that is such a huge part of how biology was my first spiritual practice, is that it showed me that all of life is interconnected. There is no separate being. And when you sort of release that belief that you are separate and isolated, and start to sort of just reach out into the world, just even a little bit, those connections, they will grow. And connecting within yourself too, those connections, they will grow and expand. And that is the healing process right there, is making those connections. Yeah, we are wounded in separation, and we heal in
yes.
connection.
Oh, I love that. What a beautiful way to end this. Oh my God, we are wounded in separation, and we heal and thrive in connection.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh, that just set right there. It was so beautiful. Oh my God. Thank you so much, Portia. I enjoyed this so much, and I hope everyone else did. I'm going to put Portia's details below. Please get in contact with her and her amazing work if you want to know more. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more on the Lighthouse coming soon.